Okay, so have you ever really stopped to wonder why, in a world full of high tech, special effects, and crazy jump scares, the old school stories of Edgar Allan Poe still manage to get right under our skin? Let's get into it, because the answer is way more fascinating than you might think.
I mean, just let that sink in for a second. We're talking 176 years. Entire empires have risen and fallen, but the kind of darkness Poe cooked up with just a pen and some paper, it's as powerful and disturbing today as it was back then.
So, what's the deal? What was his secret? How did a writer from the 19th century basically invent a formula for fear that is, for all intents and purposes, timeless? That's the big question we're going to unpack right now. And here's the big twist. Poe's true genius wasn't just about telling a scary story. He was, without even knowing it, an incredible neuroscientist. He was hacking the wiring of the human brain long before we ever had the words to describe what he was doing. So, to really understand this, we need to see how Poe's work just completely sidesteps all the stuff we're used to today, the CGI monsters and cheap scares, and instead it goes after something much, much older that's buried deep inside all of us. Say hello to your amygdala. This is that ancient primal part of your brain, your lizard brain, if you will, that's constantly scanning for danger. It doesn't do logic, it does survival. It's the part that gives you that horrible sinking feeling in the pit of your stomach. Now listen to how Poe describes this feeling. The narrator here isn't being chased by a monster. No, he's being haunted by an idea, an obsession with an old man's weird vulture eye. That kind of slow burn internal dread is exactly the stuff that sends the amygdala into overdrive. And that's his whole strategy right there. Poe knew he didn't have to show you the monster, because it is always scarier when you have to imagine it yourself. By zeroing in on dread, on things you can't see, on the terrifying unknown, like the thought of being buried alive, he turns your own imagination into the haunted house. He's not just telling you a story, he's giving your amygdala a serious workout. So this all leads to a really interesting question. If Poe's stories are so perfectly designed to set off our brain's internal alarm system, why on earth do we like them? Why do we actually seek this feeling out? Well, it's this great paradox of enjoying fear. It sounds completely backward, I know, but the answer is in this really clever trick our brains play on us. And here it is, the secret sauce: dopamine. See, when your brain senses a threat, but also knows, on some level, that you're actually safe, you're just sitting on your couch reading a book, it gives you a reward. It releases a little hit of dopamine, the feel-good chemical. You can think of it like a perfectly engineered roller coaster for your mind. Poe is an absolute master at building that suspense, that slow climb to the top, like the blades swinging lower and lower in the pit in the pendulum. As that tension goes up, your brain releases this cocktail of adrenaline and dopamine. You get the thrill of danger without any of the actual danger. And then, when the story is over, you get this huge rush of relief. It's incredibly satisfying. But it's not just about a chemical high. Poe adds another layer that makes his horror feel so intensely personal, and it has everything to do with empathy. Okay, let me introduce you to your mirror neurons. These are basically your brain's empathy cells. They're the reason you physically cringe when you see someone else get hurt, or why you feel a little jolt of happiness when you see someone you love succeed. They let us feel what other people are feeling. And this is where Poe pulls off maybe his greatest trick. See, most horror stories keep you at a safe distance. You're watching the characters from a third-person point of view. But Poe, he almost always writes in the first person. He doesn't let you just watch. He forces you to become the narrator. The fear isn't something you're just observing from afar. It's happening to you. And that creates this incredibly unsettling intimacy. So what does this all mean? It means, thanks to those mirror neurons and that first-person narration, you're not just reading about someone's descent into madness. For a few terrifying pages, you're actually living inside of it. Okay, so we've got the primal fear, the chemical reward, and that deep empathetic connection. Let's put it all together now and look at Poe's complete blueprint for terror. So this is it, the whole formula, in 3 parts. First, he hijacks your amygdala with pure psychological suspense. Then, he triggers a dopamine rush by giving you a safe thrill. And finally, he activates your mirror neurons with that intense first-person storytelling to make it all feel terrifyingly real. It is a perfect storm of neurological manipulation. And that's really the big takeaway here. Poe's stories aren't scary just because of ghosts or murderers. They're scary because he fundamentally understood the architecture of the human mind, and then he built his nightmares right inside of it. He wasn't just a writer, he was truly an architect of fear. And the blueprint he designed is exactly why his work still feels so chilling, so modern, and so impossible to escape, even today. So the next time you read Poe, or any great horror for that matter, pay attention to that process. Feel your amygdala kicking in, feel that dopamine rush when the tension breaks, and feel those mirror neurons pulling you into the character's mind. Poe literally gave us the blueprint for fear. And now that you know his secrets, do you think you'll ever be able to experience it the same way again?